Testing. Well, it looks like we're not going to have a huge group today. Actually, I would encourage, if you're okay, if you guys can move a little closer, because we actually only have one mic between the two. But if you don't mind, if you want to come closer. Welcome to the Workforce Development breakout session. We got two very exciting, very informative sessions that are going to be presented by our AWS Data House team. And I'm going to introduce the first group that's going to talk about cloud skills and how do you develop your cloud skills and through certification programs. I think most of you already met Jenni Troutman, Director of Products and Solutions with AWS. I won't get into her great bio, but also joining her is Tim Gillaspie. And Tim is here locally. He is a senior program manager with AWS, creative motivational leader, finding and delivering strategic results across industries. He's passionate about growing businesses, improving performance to achieve highly profitable, award-winning organizations. And you can read that all off his LinkedIn because that's where I copied it from. But before his life in AWS, in the cloud world, he was actually serving our country in the U.S. Air Force for over 25 years and now is a retired colonel. So of course we thank Tim for his service to our country and now applaud what he's doing for us today in our local community. So with that, I hand it over to Jenni and Tim.
Thanks, Eddie. We're going to do a little bit of back and forth today. I get to quiz my boss, which is always fun, but she's also threatened that if I ask her questions she doesn't want to answer, I have to answer them. So in that case, I'll ask Nick to answer them because he's the solutions architect who already knows everything. So we'll just, unless you have anything you want to say before we get started, Jenni?
No, go ahead.
All right, well, we'll just jump right into it then. You had a great presentation this morning, and as always, get that off my nose right away. We really do think about how we do professional development and workforce development internally and externally for AWS. And so it's really kind of interesting if you could give a little bit of background on how you came to the cloud and AWS.
Uh-oh, I might have to scoot a little closer. My background is a little bit varied, and it kind of freaks me out to realize I'm old enough to already have done all this stuff, but I am. I actually started in software development. I moved over to consulting and particularly business strategy consulting, all in technology industry. And that's what ended up bringing me to a couple of different cloud companies who were focused on, it was early days of cloud, focused on how to be successful in the cloud and looking at how they could partner with AWS in that space. And I often was getting involved in training development programs and realized that I was probably going to be able to skill up a lot more people on AWS and cloud if I actually moved to AWS. So I worked at a couple different cloud companies and then ended up coming here 5.5 years ago. How about you?
So as you heard, Eddie was talking about my military service. I was actually a logistician for the Air Force. So I did how much do you need, where do you need it, what do you have, where does it all need to go? And of course that's data heavy. I mean, like really data heavy if you get into all the issues, all the things that can go wrong with a piece of equipment. And the United States Transportation Command started working on how to create data lakes, and they mentioned AWS. And this was 10 years ago, probably right at the start of when we started talking about data and AWS. And from there, it just became a passion to learn how can I make use of all this information to solve hard problems without having to think too hard about it, which then became easy when I retired and they said, hey, can you do training at AWS? And I was like, well, yeah, I can take my training background from the Air Force and the fascination with the data and how you analyze it to put it into solutions. How do you put something somewhere just kind of fits together? And that's really what drives my passion for the cloud in general, but also in AWS. All the tools you can use to take and look at things and build on that. So I've really enjoyed that aspect of the transition. So you did talk a lot about how you talked about your teaching others how to use the cloud and expanding on that. And it's really cool that you've been able to transfer that between companies. So how do you see that as a parallel to, if I'm new to the cloud, where do I need to start?
Well, I mentioned, for those of you that saw this morning's session, kind of towards the end, I mentioned online free training. That's always where I recommend people start. You can find out if it's for you without having to do too big of an investment until you're ready. So I always recommend people go to, from AWS perspective, it's AWS Skill Builder. There's also partners where we have a lot of the content, and they have other technology content as well. edX, for those that are familiar, Coursera, Pluralsight. We have a whole number of partners, and you can find content on any of those platforms as well. And they're either free or low cost. It depends on the provider. So that's always where I recommend anybody get started. And then if you work in a organization that might support your development, I would also talk to your manager about those opportunities. In fact, I often have people coming to me internally saying, hey, do we have any, we train everybody else, do we have any budget for our own training? And so, well, it's actually the best kept secret. If it's AWS training, fine, you can just go take it since you work there. But we actually do budget professional development for people. It's just for whatever reason we don't advertise it. As soon as you ask for it, you can get it. So I would encourage you, ask, see if there's an opportunity there. But if you do want to invest further, and there's so many different options at that point, right? There's classroom training. I know people say classrooms are the way of the past, but I personally still like occasionally to get in a classroom because you're focused. When I'm doing something on my computer, I get distracted by all the email pop-ups, the instant messages. And when you're in the classroom, you can kind of shut all that off. So there are classroom opportunities. And then the best way to kind of figure out a path, I think, is if you're interested in certification, is to figure out what certification is interesting to you, because then that can get you a very focused path and streamline where you want to go.
Thanks. Yeah, I find that just awesome. We've got a really cool policy in our organization, TNC, and it's called Customer and Learning Fridays, which means there's no meetings on Fridays. And that was Jenni's idea. So at least she allows us to do it. And it is awesome because AWS then allows their employees to go either engage with customers on a regular basis to learn what their problems are without having to worry about internal AWS meetings. Or you go and take your cloud practitioner certification, or you dabble in machine learning, which then overwhelms you with their statistics and math and all the stuff I don't like, and it's better for smarter people than myself. But that kind of leads to that. How do you do that if somebody's a little farther along in their career and they've built a base of experience, whether it's in the cloud or outside the cloud? What do you recommend they do then?
That's where I would explore what are the options out there for jobs and what's interesting to you, because you can go deep in just about any area. For example, people that are particularly interested in data, big data. I'll use that one since you're a data guy. You can go online and you can find some foundational stuff to get a really kind of basic understanding. But if you're actually wanting to help people say, hey, I want to move to, we're gonna migrate to a different type of database, and I have these problems, and how do I know which one it is? You have to go at least start getting a lot deeper, because now it's not just, okay, I know that it's valuable to have data in the cloud, and there's a lot of different options. You actually have to figure out what's the difference in those options and what's going to be the best fit. And so you can go in and you can take a very focused class on it, and there's certifications even aligned to these deep, kind of niche technical concepts. And everybody's starting to do more of that. So we have our certifications in that space. But if you go on to providers online, there's a lot of different programs that are lower stakes certificates, so you don't have to go and have a proctored exam, and it's more of a, I'm going to show that I have some knowledge in this space versus that I'm a deep practitioner, and you can do a path at your own pace and pass some quizzes to show, hey, I may not be, I may not be the leading expert in this space, but I bet I know a lot more about it than most of the people here, and I can show this certification. So you can go on a lot of those broad-based websites and build to, Coursera is known for that, build to like a certificate as well.
Yeah, those are really helpful. We've set up and we've talked about it. You can go do this, but does anybody really do it? Do you have any examples of somebody who's actually gone and taken and really exploded their career by just doing the certifications?
So there are a lot, but I can tell you my favorite. I had an executive assistant who moved here from China, and she had been kind of an entrepreneur in China. But when she came to the States, she took a role as an executive assistant. She wasn't really sure what she wanted to do, and she didn't have a lot of formal training. And she was fantastic, and I encouraged her. She was interested in technology, so I encouraged her to learn some of it. And then she took it on her own, and she actually, COVID hit. She was living in the States without a lot of family around, and she didn't have a lot she could do because she couldn't see people. So she actually chose to use both that kind of development time at work as well as her own personal time to learn. And in, I think it was a year to a year and a half, she got first her cloud practitioner, which is a foundational certification that just kind of shows you understand the concepts of cloud and some of the key AWS services. Then she continued on to get her architecting on AWS associate, which is not easy, and it takes usually about 18 months of really hands-on learning and deep technical learning and hands-on practice. And then she continued and she got her architecting professional, which there are very few people in the world that have professional architecting. And then she got a job as an architect. And she talked to me. She said, I'm really thinking about talking to this other group in Amazon about a technical job. I didn't realize she'd gotten her professional. She hadn't even told me. I said, okay, great, and she came back and she said, guess what? I'm going to be a solutions architect in a different part of Amazon. And I was blown away. And she did all of that on her own self-development time. I was perfectly happy to find a new EA, given the path she'd gone on. And that was all self-learning. She didn't actually go to any of the formal classes. She did it all online and then actually hands-on practicing. So that's my favorite. And she just got married a couple weeks ago, so I can celebrate her.
Yeah, it's awesome because you see that transition. I think that's one of my favorite things about the way the tech world works is you can start out at the bottom and learn your way through to the top. It's not like working in maybe some of the hospitality industries or some of the other industries we have in Hawaii where there's a top rung of I can do hospitality work to a certain level, but within the tech industry, you can just keep growing and growing and growing, and there's really no ceiling if you continue to learn. And I really think our offerings can help individuals and companies do that. It's really exciting to some extent. I've got a bunch more questions that I can ask Jenni, but we know that there's questions out there about learning and development and how they fit together and certification. So what we'd like to do is offer the floor for questions, and we will try to give you a really good answer or an answer. So who wants to go first? And I know quite a few of you, so I'm not afraid to put people on the spot. Alan?
Already in the someone not working in a technical company, and if, say, they were interested in the field and pursued a certification, this morning when you talked, it sounded like a lot of the work or your experience has been working with companies, identifying their needs, and then going out, creating educational programs and trying to match, the people, education with the company. Can you speak to the experience of, say, individuals, say in Hawaiian hospitality, who decide they want to do something different and get a certification? What's your experience with someone just going out, getting a certification, and then going and looking for a company to work in, without having an in or anything?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways that can go, that I've seen it go. One is if you already have technical skills. If you already have technical skills, there's a lot of different ways you can learn. As I mentioned, we've got classroom training, which is often a good way to get. Once you've kind of learned the foundations and you've just gone on in your own time online, a good way to really get deep quick, where you can get hands-on and you can ask questions of experts, is there are classes that an individual can take. You don't have to be doing it as part of a company either. You actually go to the website, to the AWS website, and you can sign up for a seat in a class. And you go to that class, you get deep, you get hands-on, plus you get resources you can use as you continue to learn. And then you just have to go start practicing. You can get free AWS accounts and practice in what we call the free tier of our services, and actually start building and playing and learn how to do it and get certified. And once you have that certification, it's very easy to find a job. You put it up on LinkedIn, you go in the network, and recruiters will start calling you. If you don't already have technical skills, it's a little bit different, because it's not like you can just go learn about AWS and cloud and get a technical job if you don't know how to code already, if you're a developer, or you don't understand IT systems, if you're an architect. Then you have to actually, go somewhere where you can get kind of those functional skills. And you can do that through a traditional education program. You can do it through a lot of these online providers. Pluralsight's a great one for kind of complete tech education. And you can do that. There are programs. We have a program that's not in Hawaii yet, but that we have rolled out in some other places that take people and help them with a career change. So there's one called Restart. If you saw on our website, we had a guy in the pandemic, just before the pandemic started, he was about to open a gym. He was really passionate about physical fitness, and he was just about to open it when the pandemic hit. Not a great time to be opening a gym. So he totally switched gears. He still had the dream of opening the gym eventually, but he switched gears and he said, you know what, I think there's gonna be a lot of opportunity in tech with what's happening right now, people staying home. And he participated in this program. We have Restart, which takes people with basically no or very little technical experience, but with aptitude. They have to pass a test that shows they have the aptitude, even if they don't have the skills yet, and takes them through a 3-month program that gets them kind of some of the functional skills, gets them skills like interviewing and interacting in business communications, and gets cloud skills. And we work with partners to deliver this, and it's free. It's a more like a philanthropic program, and then works with employers to get people to interview at the end with the idea of getting people employed. And so that's a fairly new program. It's only a couple years old, so we're working on building it up, and part of building it up in new locations is finding the partners that can help us to recruit people, to get the employers lined up, and to get actually some of that on the job. We do the AWS and cloud training, but we need other people to do some of the other foundational training. And so that's why it's not here yet. It's kind of a growing thing, but there are places in the U.S. that have it, and I'm confident we'll get it here eventually.
In the back.
So some of us are sort of these agents to bring in folks into the workforce. And I would say that while I think I know convincing students to go into computer science. But then to get them the skills that may land them these jobs is essential. And I don't know if there is, and I know we've spoken in other capacities and I've asked similar questions, but it's finding relevance for those of us that are just not in the field. And I speak even for some of our computer science faculty that, faculty often become dated in their profession. And so it's getting them informed, but in a way in which we could speak to students and parents in the community that would most benefit from this. And so I don't know if there are resources that could translate a solutions architect to this is what I do on a day-to-day. And then ultimately, you could do it with these certifications, but you'd benefit most if you had your baccalaureate in computer science plus this. And so I don't know if that's a resource that's somewhat available, because I think that we all realize the need to build that workforce capacity.
So I think we've had this conversation before, and Alan and I have it on a regular basis. It's actually one of the projects we're working on. But internal to AWS, we do have training. AWS Educate and AWS Academy both provide some of those foundational resources for teachers, and so they can communicate what it is AWS is, but really what the cloud is on a more broad scale. It doesn't just go, hey, here's AWS, this is all it starts earlier and with the foundational. Putting that all together, though, is a hard task, and it's not just one group that has to do it. We have what AWS is, but that language is specific to AWS. There's some familiarity on how the cloud works. That covers every cloud provider. But when you're talking about just getting started, AWS Educate and AWS Academy are the two places to start in terms of just for instructors learning about what they're going to do, especially in the K through 12 and AWS Educate. And it's just educate.aws is the website, and it's really gives you a starting point. You can just register on there, and you can get access to the material. And that's kind of your starting point. Any other suggestions on?
There also is a training on Skill Builder called Cloud Roles. Is that the name of it? Or Roles in the Cloud. It's along there. And it actually describes key roles in the cloud and explains kind of what they do on a day-to-day. But as far as then taking the content and kind of learning it, I would agree Educate and Academy are a good place to go. There are some other programs, and I think some educators are starting to take advantage of them here in Hawaii. I mentioned one earlier, Amazon Future Engineer, which is allowing some K-12 teachers to start bringing cloud concepts into the classroom. And we need to do more. And that's what Tim has been involved in helping figure out, and part of actually why we're here today is how do we get more of those programs uptake in the community here, because that's really the stuff that we can do at scale, but we have to get people's interest in order to kind of build it up.
You mentioned the roles in the cloud, and this is a good course. That was one of the ones I took right when I got started in AWS about 2 years ago. But there's a couple other ones also on business and how to understand what cloud means for business and how do you use that. So those functional trainings are also embedded in the online training on AWS Skill Builder, and those are really helpful just for understanding how the cloud works and why businesses are interested in adopting the cloud. So even for non-tech, there's good training on AWS Skill Builder about why do I care? Why is the cloud important to me as a business professional? What does it do for me besides the IT guys are doing down the hall? Why should I care? And so for broadening that out, it's really good for the instructors to be familiar with it. And I always like the cost savings too. I mean, that kind of stuff. But understanding the difference between that and on-premises computing, it has all that lays all that out in the course. So it's really good.
I would say STEM in general and whatever they're passionate about. If you can get them passionate about STEM at an early age, they'll do well in these technical roles when they're older. I don't think there's one that you need to focus on because it's very transferable. Like my undergraduate degree's in math. I loved math as a kid because all my teachers made it a game and I'm super competitive. So if I could win, I loved it. That meant that it was really easy for me in college when I did some computer programming when I was in the software development world, because STEM is about a way of thinking and processing more than it is about the actual subject. And it's that analytical skill set that will do really well in the technical roles and prepare them for them in the future. Now, that's the technical roles. Cloud is actually impacting all roles now. So we talk a lot about cloud practitioner as our foundational certification. It's less the certification to worry about. It's the concepts that cloud practitioner is relevant for everyone. We recommend salespeople do it. We recommend marketers do it, finance people, because it's about understanding the business model around it. And there are cloud roles that span all those. So in that situation, it's more people just need to understand that cloud touches everything. But if you're looking particularly at these technical tracks that tend to go deeper and tend to be the ones we're talking a lot about when we talk about digital skills, it's really STEM in general at a young age. That answer it.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to think of like what happens at the public school. I mean, it seems to me that building a foundation is more important than getting a kid into a particular technical track quickly.
Yeah.
Which I think people get sort of confused about because they think they have to do computer science really early, or just really having a broad-based foundation.
Yeah, it really is. And it's really because the broader that foundation, the more both analytically and creatively people can think.
I'll add on a little bit. We just came back from Singapore, and we went to an exhibit down by the bay that was an art exhibit, but it was all about technology. And it was about how technology and art coexisted in the same space. And it's that same theory. The creativity that you need in order to be successful in the work environment doesn't just come from knowing how to do the math. And being able to work with your peers and understand what they're doing as you work in teams to build solutions to problems doesn't just come from STEM, but it comes from biology, it comes from art, it comes from music. But it also, you have to understand what the tech side is doing. So having that STEM background, science, that is just as important, the engineering to understand. So that consolidated picture, and some of the work that UH is doing today on developing cross-cutting curriculum that isn't just a finance curriculum for a master's of finance. They get finance, they get computer science, they get business management outside of finance. So those cross-cutting areas in terms of, and sometimes it's just a touch. It's not a whole semester of something that's unrelated to their real passion, but it gives them that, oh, you know what, I can go ask this person for that. And that starts early, but again, it's about their passion. There's going to be different areas of passion, but knowing that there might be some solution for a problem you have in a different area is just as powerful as being the expert in that field sometimes.
Do the AWS certifications make the journey to like a specialization in, say, for instance, Salesforce or Middleman, MuleSoft, or does it shorten that path?
I would say they're just different paths. So there are specializations, there are certifications that are specializations in and of themselves. So for example, there's a certification for SAP on AWS, which is really a specialization, right? It's saying you know how to build SAP solutions on AWS. And then there's certifications that are based more on a role. like the architect. So we've gone both routes. And then there are specializations you can do that don't have a certification that are typically not that different. The difference in them is the level of rigor with the testing process. That's really the difference. A certification, in order to maintain its value, has to have a whole lot of rigor in the testing process to make it really clear that this person can do what they say they can do. Whereas a lot of specializations are more about showing that you've developed the knowledge, and they're often not proctored, so it could be your friend developed the knowledge and helped you out a bit. And that, but hopefully, you know, you get to know people and you see through that pretty quickly. But that tends to be kind of the key difference. But certifications kind of span both, right? Some of them are very much a specialization. Some of them are more about a credential that says you can do that role. Did that answer it, or did I miss?
Yeah, sort of. An add-on question, because I know you talked this morning about more like entry level, getting the certification, but then you talk about the middle and senior pieces. And you know, this is in a K through 12 piece, which I think is good. You plant the seed, you're not sure if you get a banana or an orange growing. But today we need to pick the fruits. And how do we get to that middle and senior level today? I do participate in the IT sector partnership that Alan's one of the leaders in. But I think for a lot of us, it's the immediacy of now. We need people now.
Yeah. So it is deeper. There are deeper certifications. So they're at all different levels. Certifications start with a foundational, which is basically cloud practitioner. That's basically saying, and by the way, all of the cloud providers have their own, but I think we all have foundational and then deeper. So there's the first one that says, yeah, I know what cloud is. I understand the concepts. I can apply it to a job, but just at the foundational level. Then there is kind of the next tier, which what we call associate, which is saying that's getting to a little bit more kind of mid-tier, like you have a few years of experience, you're technical, and you can do whatever kind of role that is. And then we have the deepest level, which is we kind of branch it two ways. If it's kind of going down that role-based path, we call them professional. And that is showing that you are really an expert in that. So you are very seasoned, lots of experience, if you have that professional developer or professional architect. And then we also have the specialty technology area, which is at that same level as the professional. And that's saying if you're certified in databases, then you are analytics, then you are a deep expert with a lot of experience in that space, because that one, those are really tailored to the senior talent. So entry-level talent tends to be more cloud practitioner. They might start to get into associate, but they need experience to really be solid there. And then deep professional and specialties are deep experts, senior talent.
Address some of that too. I think, you know, another way to just get the text, I totally get it. When we, you know, as an IT consultant, we have needs at that level of expertise, right? But some of our clients equally have that demand and need. And some, you know, creative ways that we're working with our clients is, you know, if they engage us with our projects, they recognize we're the experts, but yet part of the condition of us engaging with them is they want us to help teach their people, right? So it's learning on the job. I mean, they could still do the certification classes, but nothing goes better than actually applying it, right? So Clive's going to be speaking the next session, but he's actually engaged with one of our clients where we're actually doing that.
I think playing off something you just said there, I think a large part of some of the comments people in the room have made is really understanding, I think, the opportunity for advancement with some of these certifications. And I think something that could be helpful within the state, within the sector, is being able to understand both the kind of the supply and the demand of individuals getting these certifications with different demographics and different geographic locations, and how that aligns with the need of employers. Does AWS make any of the aggregate data about who is getting certifications available to help inform these types of conversations?
Not much. We did publish, I'm trying to remember the number, last August, the number of active certifications that we have, AWS certifications out there, but it's a global number. It's not going to talk about the local market. And I'm trying to remember because I don't want to quote the wrong number, but I think it was around 500,000 across the globe. That's across all certifications. Now, the foundational certification is getting to be around close to half of that. And so when you talk about people that are kind of at that intermediate or advanced skill level, the numbers are not very big. And they need to be. But there's a couple reasons for that. One is there just aren't enough people that are skilled. Another one is sometimes when people get their first certification, not so much the foundational, but the associate type level, they keep learning, but they stop certifying because they've got the job and they don't need the credential, and they maybe wait. And if they end up wanting to change jobs or something where they might need that credential, they'll get it then. Or their certification expires and they don't bother to recertify because it's gotten them what they need. And so that's the other side of it, is there's probably more people at that skill level out there in the workforce, or there definitely are, but they don't always keep them active.
Yeah, I think kind of similar to some other questions that have been asked earlier. Where do you see the local opportunities for individuals? We're talking a lot about certifications, and specifically, like if we look at the cloud practitioner certification, many of us are either working directly or indirectly with a lot of students. And so where is the local job growth within AWS or an AWS type of subsidiary who's using that type of technical platform to help guide some of these students into those sort of job opportunities?
Yeah, so I'd say that's one of the things, and I think we've talked about chicken and egg question. You've got the people that are working towards a certification and are getting certified and they want a job, and you've got companies that are looking to hire, but they don't want to necessarily hire until they know there's somebody there to hire. And so it's a balancing act that's always going on. And Eddie, you remember when I said I was going to ask you questions? This might be one of those points when I'm looking for a little bit of outside of AWS with Data House, and we look at that.
I understand the local companies, certainly with like Data House and a lot of the IT sector strategy work that's being done in the through the University of Hawaii and the community colleges. But I was just wondering specifically within AWS, what you foresee as maybe being some type of long-term investment in Hawaii in helping to grow the workforce.
So there's some stuff going on that side, but it's not releasable yet, unfortunately. There is some stuff that'll come out probably the end of August.
Thank you.
Yep. Dang it, I thought I was going to get to ask Eddie a question. In the back.
Thanks. Jenni, one of my companies is a management consulting firm, and we recently did a project with workforce development and worked with a funder that was trying to find the best ways to allocate their resources towards finding jobs, whether they're high-tech jobs or otherwise. But the key is that there must be, kind of as related to the earlier questioner, jobs here in Hawaii that could support people with those skills with the goal of expanding our tax base and not have people train here, move and work elsewhere. So do you have any real-world evidence that we could suggest or take that? Maybe it'll be released soon. Maybe there's a desk at Amazon to analyze this sort of thing. But what sort of income increases or deltas could be expected with some of the training that we see here? And again, just a broader picture of, are there actually companies and jobs available for people who maintain and obtain these types of skills and credentials?
Actually, I can take that just because I also sit on the board of True, which is really focused on the demand side of the equation for our community businesses, organizations here. So it's really trying to get our businesses, our government to embrace technology so that they create the demand to pay for their high value jobs, right? But we're trying to train and provide the supply for that talent. So it's both. You can't do either or, right? But the reality is
Yeah, and to your question on the income or the salaries people can expect, there's a great study that a company called Global Knowledge, a training provider, does every year, which is average salary of the highest paying technical certifications. And if you look it up, you can just Google it. You can find the most recent one. I can tell you that the AWS cloud architecting on AWS associate certification is always one of the top 5. I believe the top 3 are all cloud. And this is for tech overall. It's not just cloud, but the top 3, I can't remember if they report 10 or top 10 or top 20, but the top 3 are cloud for sure. And it gives the average salary. Now, the salary is the average kind of across the U.S. or globally. I can't remember so, it's not going to be a local number, but it gives you a sense for the income levels that go along with those certifications.
The True initiative is actually, that's one of our goals, is to try to start tracking that metric. We're still further away from that, but I can tell you one anecdotal story that just came out last week, I think it was, at the esports lab launch for Waipahu Library. So they interviewed this, it was actually a couple of individuals that were in the hospitality industry. I think they were just servers, right? Working in a restaurant. And they basically said, I wasn't making enough money. COVID really hampered my income. So they went into coding through esports. And now they got picked up on a job as a coder for this esport company, and they're making 6 figures. So they're just, I mean, that's just an anecdotal, one story, but I think that is probably going to be more the trend.
And I think that the job as educators is to make sure, and our role is to make sure that they all know that not everybody has to be a software development engineer or a coder. Because that's probably the fastest turnover to computer science that I can think of for most kids is they just want to play the game. They don't want anything to do with creating this. That's my son. He's like, why would I ever want to do that, Dad? I want to go be the sports manager for, the Broncos or something like that. But then I tell him, you're building your team using AI on ESPN fan base to create his fake teams. And as he learns more about that, the more interested he gets in the background associated with what he really loves, which is, football and that type of stuff. But he's learning that there's background. So not them understanding that not everybody has to be a coder, but they can use that technology is just as important as they look at it. Whether you're a biologist or you're a nonprofit trying to save the planet, it doesn't matter. It's now becoming ingrained in our society.
What was the question that you wanted to ask Eddie?
I got to ask it. I told him I was going to get to give him a question and he would answer it, and it was awesome.
What was that question again?
It was the one you just answered. So whatever that question was, perfect. You want me to ask him another question?
Yeah, I mean, kind of had all of us on the edge of our seat.
I didn't have any good questions, so that's what I was really hoping for everybody else to advocate. But since you're asking, Eddie, how does Data House use the certifications as they look at their way ahead and how you're going to grow the business?
I mean, obviously we're in the technology industry, and that's all we do. So, but there is, from a business perspective, and I'm going to pitch AWS because they are our partner. But whether it be AWS, whether it be Google, whether it be Microsoft, I mean, these are all multiple valuation type of companies that if you affiliate yourself with them, whether as a company or as an individual, your
Yeah, I would agree completely. And I don't know how much any of you know about Amazon, but the way we operate, we have now 16, was 14, now 16, what we call leadership principles, which is how we foster our culture and the behaviors we want people to exemplify. And there's one that resonates particularly well with our part of the business, which is called Learn and Be Curious. And there's an expectation that we are constantly curious and learning and developing and growing, and everybody does that in a different way. But the key is really to keep learning. And it's one thing we're challenged with, frankly, from a training business is everybody learns differently. We all think differently and we learn differently. And how do you keep people engaged? So we're constantly trying out new things, different ways to help people learn. Historically, we were, come in the classroom and learn, and we've been doing everything we can to evolve, keep that, but evolve to have lots of different options. And so I really do encourage you, if you have any interest in learning either yourself or encouraging others to learn, to go to Skill Builder, because what you'll find there is lots of different ways of learning. There's game-based for people that are much more that you can't keep engaged unless there's some kind of a competition. I speak from experience. I might not be a gamer in the online sense, but I love competition. There's game-based stuff where people go on and they learn the concepts by gaming, by actually, it's like they're in a virtual world. There's hands-on, what we call hands-on labs, which is a way to get hands-on with the AWS services without risking getting onto a service that's actually going to charge you. There's no risk there. There's video for people who prefer video. There's transcript for people who prefer to read, right? There's lots of different ways, and we would love input on how you learn if those ways are not addressing it, because that's really the key is for people to keep learning over time, they have to be able to learn in their own way. So we're always looking for input on what keeps you engaged and curious and wanting to learn.
If I can comment on that too. I actually did a lot of the training, and it's actually one of the most engaging training programs I've ever done. And I promise I don't work for any of them. I just met them in the other room, but I recently got my cloud practitioner certification. A lot of the problems that you do is very real world like stuff, you know what I mean? So so-and-so comes to you with this problem or whatever, and it actually launches up in like a console, like the actual AWS console that you would use, you know what I mean? And then you gotta kind of figure it all out, plug it in. The game that she was talking about, that Cloud Quest, one of the funnest things I've ever done. I already got my cert and I still play it like all the time. Yeah, so it's like a city, and then like you go around, like you shoot like these little robots, and then like when it drops, like in order to like capture it or something, you have to like answer like a question. You know what I mean, like an AWS question. So super engaging content. I did a software engineering track at the same time, and it was horrible compared to the AWS stuff. So yeah.
Thank you for that, and congratulations on your certification. When I speak, I say cloud practitioner is foundational. It's the level of cert I have too, and it's not easy. Even though it's the foundational one, it's still hard.
Associate test in a couple weeks.
Oh, good luck. That's awesome. Good luck.
Very different than a practitioner for sure. Yeah.
For sure, yeah.
Any last questions before we wrap up? And we got to give him a yellow shirt, by the way.
I think so. I think he needs one.
Any other questions? All right, well,
All right. Thank you, everyone.